The Toronto Raptors' financial situation this summer is awful, and there are three key players set to become free agents in Fred VanVleet, Jakob Poeltl, and Gary Trent Jr. And if this Bleacher Report article is accurate, then Trent is the most likely to leave in the offseason. So what does this mean for the Toronto Raptors and their future? Can they afford to lose him? Let's get into it. This is Amateur Hour Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors content in videos, live streams, and shorts. If you like what you see from today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and help me on my road to 15,000 subscribers, and drop a like as well to show your support. This video is also sponsored by the Queensway Automotive Group. Check the links in the description to learn more about QAG. Reports are now starting to come out about the Raptors and their off-season aspirations, given the fact that they are in a little bit of a tight spot financially, and there are so many contracts that the Raptors need to worry about right now. Upcoming free agents are Jakob Poeltl, Fred VanVleet, and Gary Trent Jr. amongst the key players in this team and its core. And also, the Raptors have to deal with the fact that OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are extension eligible. And if things go the right way for Siakam in terms of his All-NBA candidacy this week, then he could also be in line for a Supermax. But there definitely needs to be a hierarchy, a list of things the Raptors want to get done in order. And it would seem as though, based on the reports coming out from Eric Pincus, Gary Trent Jr., at least to the opinion of many rival executives around the league, is expected not to sign long-term with the Toronto Raptors. But what exactly does this mean for Gary Trent Jr.? Does that mean that he's going to leave for nothing in free agency? Does that mean there's a sign and trade that is possible? Or could that also mean Gary Trent Jr. is going to sign with the Raptors and is expected to get traded shortly thereafter? Not quite a sign and trade, but a little bit down the line. Well, let's look at the situation from Gary Trent Jr.'s perspective first of all. This season, Gary Trent Jr. had a little bit of an underwhelming season. In terms of statistics, it was a pretty good season for Trent, but in terms of maybe the expectations for the player based on what the fans were perceiving, maybe the player expecting to take a jump this season, perhaps he fell a little bit short of those aspirations. Perhaps that was down to a little bit of his play. Maybe he let himself down defensively. Maybe the coaching wasn't tailored towards the way he wanted to play the game. And it also didn't help that his role was changing on every given night. Starting a bunch of games, then coming off the bench in a bunch of games, then getting huge minutes off the bench in some games. Closing some games, getting small to no minutes, very little minutes off the bench. All of these things were happening for Gary Trent Jr., so it was difficult to really lock down a specific role. Now, he was the most expendable of the original starting five before the Jakob Poeltl trade, so I support the decision to move him to the bench. In the starting five for the Raptors, the guys of VanVleet, Anunoby, Siakam, Barnes, Poeltl, that starting five worked, so it made sense to go with those five. And it kind of seemed like Gary Trent Jr. was the odd man out. And for a player who has a player option this summer worth $18.8 million, he was probably looking for his long-term deal this season. So there has to be a little bit of a sour taste in Gary Trent Jr.'s mouth as to his role this season, wanted to take on a bigger role, wanted to earn himself that long-term contract. I'm sure Gary Trent Jr. feels as though Toronto is a great place to be and a great place to stay, but if his role is going to continue in this fashion, and based on kind of the perception we have going into the offseason, his role is going to stay relatively the same, maybe it would be better to look elsewhere. But Gary Trent Jr., when he signed this contract, it was worth about $18 million a year. It was 2 years, which we're at the end of the 2 years, plus that player option. And the length of this contract being so short, only 2 years plus the player option, ideally you'd like to do a 3+1 or just a 4-year in general. But for Gary Trent Jr., this really screamed to me like a bet on yourself sort of contract, a bridge contract, if you will. It is the contract that bridges you from your rookie contract up to your big prime contract. It is the small little window where you want to earn yourself the biggest amount of money when you sign that long-term deal. So Gary Trent Jr. seemingly would be ready for that long-term, very financially secure deal. But based on what we saw this season, having already said that maybe he fell short of his own expectations and the expectations of the fans who expect him to maybe take on a bigger jump this season, would it be more wise for Gary Trent to stay with the Raptors for another year, take that player option? Whether or not it is with the Raptors or with another team taking that player option for Gary Trent, he becomes a pretty nice rental piece for a contender to look at. Gary Trent Jr. provides a lot of these shot-making qualities that the top teams in the NBA would certainly be looking for. And if you look at the NBA playoffs, we're in the middle of the NBA playoffs right now. these sort of shot makers and these sort of players who have shown an ability, at least previously for Trent, to operate well in the clutch, they can be of quite significant value. And the Raptors could strike in now on some pretty good value for the player if he does take that player option. The reality is, I was kind of looking around the league to which teams would maybe be interested in bringing in Gary Trent Jr. to the team for next season. And on the surface, based on the rosters right now, I really struggle to see a lot of suitors for him this offseason. Obviously, one that comes to me is the Dallas Mavericks. I would be really shocked if Kyrie Irving stayed with that team beyond this offseason. So money is going to be there, and putting a shot maker beside Luka Doncic, a shooter beside Luka Doncic, I think that would help Luka Doncic's game. And I think putting Gary Trent in that situation would also really benefit his own game. There'd be some question marks about the defense in that spot, but there's question marks about that entire roster's ability to defend. So I think Gary Trent Jr. fits in pretty well there. As for the Los Angeles Lakers, I think Austin Reeves is due a payday this offseason. Not sure if the Lakers will give it to him. All of a sudden, that shooting guard position opens up in the starting five. A great place for Gary Trent Jr. to slot in. But other than that, there doesn't seem to be a ton of interest going around right now. And even in that Bleacher Report article that I'm basing this video off of, there's a mention that perhaps the money isn't there that Gary Trent Jr. was expecting. If you told me at the start of this season there'd be a realistic scenario in which Gary Trent Jr. actually signs that player option, I would be beyond shocked. It seemed all the signs are pointing towards he's going to be worth more than that. He's going to be worth at least $20 million, if not like $22 million a year. He's going to be looking for his 4-year, $84 to $88 million contract, lock that in, get himself completely financially secure basically for the rest of his life. I mean, Gary Trent Sr. as well as an NBA player, he's financially secure. Gary Trent Jr. wanting to lock in on that contract. All of those things made sense. But for a player who has already previously took on that bridge contract, a bet on yourself sort of deal, maybe he wants to take one more crack at it this season. Maybe he wants to go one more year and prove his actual worth in the NBA before locking himself into that long-term deal. But there could be question marks about whether or not that is going to be with the Toronto Raptors. I already spoke about why there could be a sour taste in Gary Trent Jr.'s mouth as to his role this season. Does he want a repeat of that next season? Like, my expectation at this point is that, Siakam will still be here. OG will still be here. Questions if he gets traded, but I don't think so. Barnes, of course, will still be here. Poeltl, I expect to sign and extend here. VanVleet, whether you like it or not, I expect him to sign and extend here. We just can't really afford to lose that position, and there's not a lot of free agents that we can replace him with. So Trent might be coming off the bench once again, and if there's other suitors, like I said, in Dallas or the Lakers who come looking for him, that is a much more desirable destination for him to prove his worth. Also, on top of the player option thing, Gary Trent Jr. could be involved in a sign and trade with the Raptors. To me, this seems like the most ideal scenario for the team and for the player. The Raptors get a decent amount of value back with Gary Trent, and the other team, obviously, they can take on Gary Trent Jr. with a little bit of an incentive here. Why sign and trades work in the NBA? Because other teams, like, why would you not just sign the player outright? You don't have to give up anything in the process. Especially for these teams who want to be extremely competitive, want to operate very near the tax or a little bit above the tax, it is very, very highly incentivized for them to pick up a player and get the bird rights. This was a bit of a catalyst in the Raptors wanting to get Jakob Poeltl at the trade deadline, because trading for him allowed them to keep his bird rights going into the offseason. Also gave them the opportunity to have him for the rest of the season. That didn't really work out from a team perspective, but from a player perspective, that makes sense. And when you're signing the player, it's a little bit easier to bring him in because you have those bird rights. So trading Gary Trent Jr. gives the opportunity to the other team to acquire his bird rights in the process, which allows you to go a little bit above the cap, but not pay any tax on that part of the player's salary because you have his bird rights, named after Larry Bird. It's incentivizing teams paying their players a little bit more, and the players getting what they deserve while still staying with the same team. And since it would be involved in a sign and trade, we'd be trading him to the team, therefore the bird rights would still remain on the contract that we give him, so the other team naturally would acquire those bird rights in the process. That's why it makes sense. You're definitely not getting any sort of extreme values out of Gary Trent Jr.'s situation, but the reality is, like, we kind of doomed ourselves with this 2-year contract where he has this flexibility. Like, we're not in the position really that we wanted to be 2 years on. We traded Norman Powell in order to get Gary Trent Jr. That trade made a lot of sense at the time. You're getting a player maybe just as good as Norman Powell, who's younger and a little bit cheaper. But extending him only 2 years kind of put us in this difficult spot right now where we're thinking about exactly where the team is going to be going in the future, what exactly Gary Trent Jr. is going to bring us, and it's just so much complications in this entire process. But if you ask me, based on the entire situation going on with the Raptors, like, you could even let Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. walk and sign Poeltl to a contract, but you're still operating very close to the tax line based on the cap hold with that contract. So there's not really an ideal situation at all from a free agency perspective for the Raptors, but it wouldn't really make sense to continue to run it with this exact same core, not really changing any of the fundamental pieces here, especially when the depth of the team is so depleted. So can you open up spots with that Gary Trent Jr. contract being involved in a sign and trade? Maybe you take on an expiring contract, so next summer you have a lot more flexibility with your cap situation. That's when Siakam will be a free agent if he doesn't extend right now. OG will be a free agent if he doesn't extend right now. And Scotty Barnes, he'll be extension eligible, and who knows what sort of value he'll be getting in that contract. We hope he's good enough that he's worthy of a max contract at that point in his career. So a lot of complicated situations. My best guess, my thoughts based on everything going on, VanVleet stays, Poeltl stays, Gary Trent goes. I wouldn't be shocked anymore to see him take that player option, but I think the most likely scenario right now is a sign and trade, and I think that works pretty well for what the Raptors want, and I think it works pretty well for what the player wants. He's going to want a bigger role, he's going to want to be a starter, and I think he can do that somewhere else. He seems to like it in Toronto, and I applaud him for his professionalism all throughout the season, never saying anything negative about his role, just staying quiet, going to work. That is very admirable of the player to be able to do that. With so much turmoil going on in his career this season, in a contract year no less, but maybe it is time for the Raptors to change their direction just a little bit here, and Gary Trent could be the first piece to help and do that, the first domino to fall in this whole complicated offseason process for the Toronto Raptors. What do you guys make of Gary Trent Jr.'s contract? What do you think is the most likely outcome of his future with the Raptors? Is he going to stay? Is he going to get signed and traded? Is he going to get traded later on in the season? Give me your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. That is all for me for today. Drop a like if you did enjoy this video. Subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for more Raptors content just like this, and we'll see you again next time for another video.